The Glouster Gladiator was Britain's last and finest biplane fighter. Designed by H.P. Folland, the prototype first flew in September 1934. This stunning example can still be seen in the air thanks to the world-famous Shuttleworth collection at Old Warden Aerodrome in Bedfordshire.
Well, I always wanted to fly at Old Warden, ever since I was a boy and first heard about the place. There was something about it that attracted me. I was very lucky. I joined the Royal Air Force. I became a test pilot, which is almost a prerequisite for flying here. And as soon as I could, I managed to get my foot in the door.
I would say of the aircraft I've flown at the collection, the Gladiator is one of the real classics. She's a beautiful handling aeroplane and a real unique example, and in fact the only example of her type flying in the world at this moment.
Former Mosquito pilot David Ogilvie has spent a lifetime in aviation. The Glouster Gladiator is one of many aircraft he has flown in his illustrious career. It's one he came to know well during his time as general manager of the Shuttleworth collection.
It was owned by the Gloucester Aircraft Company, its makers, for a very long time, but as the Gloucester Aircraft Company was merged into other organisations, the Hawker Siddeley Group, the aircraft was handed over by Gloucesters to the Shuttleworth collection. The chief pilot here at Shuttleworth was also chief test pilot at Gloucester's, so it's fairly clear how and where that came about. But it now joins the collection here as a very special historic aeroplane in a very special collection of old aeroplanes dating from before the First World War until just after the end of the Second World War.
The rapid expansion of the RAF saw 14 new fighter squadrons formed between 1936 and 1937. During this time, the Air Ministry ordered Gladiators in their hundreds. With over 200 sold abroad, the final tally of aircraft produced was 648.
The features of this particular aeroplane were quite unique for a biplane. It was, I believe, the only closed cockpit fighter, certainly the only closed cockpit English fighter biplane. It's got 4 machine guns. There's flaps on the top and bottom wings for reducing the landing speed. So quite an innovative aeroplane.
One of Britain's biggest pre-war export successes, the Gladiator saw active service with many countries. With its potent armament, harmonised controls and 840 horsepower Bristol Mercury engine, she was arguably the ultimate biplane fighter.
It's quite a big engine. It's nearly 25 litres, and when you compare that with your average car of 1-2 litres, you've almost got 3 litres per cylinder. It was designed by Roy Fedden at Bristol's, and he was almost the world leader on radial engines of the time. Particularly with these engines, you have the 4 valves per cylinder, which is something that's come in cars in the last 10 or 15 years. It's supercharged, where you actually draw the air in through the air intake, pass it through the carburettor, which is similar to car practice, but then it is pressurised by the supercharger and blown into the cylinders under pressure for the high power settings. So you're effectively forcing more mixture into the cylinders and hence more power.
Before we fly any aircraft, it's normal procedure to do a power run to check that everything is working normally. So we would start the aeroplane up in a normal fashion. We would give it a long time to warm up. And then we'd set a reasonably high power setting, and we check the 2 ignition systems by switching each off in turn to make sure they're working correctly, and just check that the aeroplane engine is performing properly before we take off.
Although at the outbreak of war it was becoming obsolete with the introduction of the Hurricane and slightly later the Spitfire, it did serve operationally during the war, and one squadron, number 247, was used in the Battle of Britain to defend Plymouth Dockyard. After that it served a lot overseas in Malta, Middle East, Norway and so on, so it did actually fight quite actively.
It's still an effective fighter because of the manoeuvrability and the firepower. There's 4 of these on it, which was not bad for the start of World War II. And she did give a good account of herself in those 30s.
Before securing a position in aviation history by becoming the first pilot to exceed 1,000 miles an hour, a young trainee fighter pilot named Peter Twiss cut his teeth on the Gladiator at the Naval Fighter School in Yeovilton.
And the aircraft we had here were Gladiators, Skewers, Rocks, Fulmars. So there was an opportunity to fly all those, but we all enjoyed the Gladiator most of all. And the Gladiator was kept fully armed, actually. In the event of an air raid, it could be used as a fighter. And I was just about to go off on one day when there was a report of some heavy air raids in Southampton area. So I went off and thought I'd climb up and see if I could see any signs of activity, which I did. And I climbed up to about 14,000 feet, looking in the general direction of Southampton and Portsmouth, and certainly saw nothing. And I was on my way back, still at quite high, and suddenly two Spitfires zoomed past me, and I thought, I'm glad they weren't shooting at me, because they would have got me. I did hear later that there were some CR-42s amongst the aircraft at Southampton, which they could easily have mistaken for a Gladiator. Anyway, I got a good bollocking when I landed from my instructor for attempting to do anything like that.
As you can see there with the nose stuck up in the air, I was weaving it from side to side when taxiing because I can't actually see what it's going towards. It's directionally unstable on the ground. You have to pay very, very close attention on takeoff and landing to keeping straight. The one thing that catches the first-time pilot out slightly is the rudder is very, very light and sensitive. You do get used to that, but it's a thing you have to get used to on the first flight. And of course you're flying it more or less by the seat of the pants, as they used to say.
I do remember the first time when I flew the Gladiator. A great privilege, as it always is with the old airplanes. But as soon as I got it into the air and got it into the climb, I put it to the natural angle to get the thing going skywards. Looked at my notes and it said the speed was 80. Looked at the ASI, it was exactly 80 miles an hour. So it's a natural airplane that automatically goes to the ideal position that you require to get the best out of it. Rapidly after that, it becomes obvious that you've got a delightful fighting machine in your hand, very positive in pitch and roll, relatively stable in yaw, and quite a powerful motor. So delightful experience, very nice airplane.
I think some aeroplanes actually ask to be flown, some definitely don't, but the Gladiator is one that asks to be flown and asks to be enjoyed, really. I mean, it's an aeroplane that you can't help enjoying. I don't know what it's like operationally, but when you're flying in peaceful countryside over in Bedfordshire, it's very pleasant.
It's very important that aircraft such as this be kept flying so that people today who read about them in books, comics and what have you can see and feel what the aircraft are like in the air. Old Warden's the only place in the world where you can see most of the aircraft we have because they're unique, and you can see them in operation. We try and show the sight and the sound of the airplane in the air rather than have them dead and sitting in a museum.
It's always a thrill to fly these classic aircraft, and aircraft such as this will take a pilot back to the real roots of his flying. Lots of modern aeroplanes, both military and civilian, rely on highly automated systems to enable them to do an excellent job, but in many ways that's taken the fun out of flying. With aeroplanes such as the Gladiator, the pilot's taken back to the real roots of flying. Engine handling is not automatic, there are no autopilots, it's just a lovely pilot's aeroplane to fly.
From a pure pilot's point of view, the Gladiator is the nearest thing to a perfect aeroplane you can find, I think.
When it first appeared in the 1930s, the Bristol Blenheim was, by any standards, a remarkable aircraft. Even more remarkable, however, were the crews that flew them during the Second World War. So hazardous were their missions that their bravery earned them the very highest respect from their peers in the RAF, to whom they became known as the Blenheim Boys.
Your job was to go there regardless, and you saw these black dots and the flag around to welcome you. Well, what could you do? You couldn't even cross your fingers because you're wearing gloves.
I don't think we realised that the losses were as considerable as they were.
And we lost an awful lot of good guys, pilots, gunners, navigators.
At the start of the war, the RAF had more Blenheims than any other type of aircraft on charge. It was the only multi-combat role aircraft long before that term was even thought of. It was used as a daylight bomber, a night bomber, a long-range fighter, a night intruder, a night fighter, photo reconnaissance, direct support for troops, and so on and so on.
In 1934, Lord Rothermere, owner of the Daily Mail, expressed a desire for a fast and spacious aircraft for his personal use. Bristol designer Frank Barwell already had something on the drawing board, and by April 1935, an aircraft named Britain First made its maiden flight. It was found to be 30 miles an hour faster than the RAF's latest fighter, and a military version named the Blenheim was very soon put into production. In all, there were 3 main versions produced throughout the life of the Blenheim, the Marks I, IV and V. By the start of the war, however, new aircraft and techniques had been developed, making the Blenheims extremely vulnerable to attack. But to the pre-war crews accepting the early versions, it represented a new and exciting step forward.
And we were happier, at least I was happier to be in a Blenheim than all the ancient bombers we had, always unreliable engines. Well, like most Mark I's, it was the best. It was ideal. It just took off on its own, but when you got the speed up on the runway, we hardly had to raise the, pull the stick back at all. Off she went. Lovely to fly.
The Aircraft Restoration Company, based at Duxford, specialise in restoring and maintaining classic aircraft and are currently restoring a Mark IV Blenheim back to flying condition.
As an aeroplane, it's beautiful in the air. It sounds fantastic. But as an engineering achievement, it's that where the satisfaction comes in for me, to actually see it fly and think of all the years and all the effort that's gone into that. That's really that summarises it for me.
I've been involved with the Blenheim for some 27 years now. I've been involved in building 2 to a flying condition, flown in them many times, crashed in one, and I think that really we should be proud of the fact that this type of aircraft existed for us in those dark years of the 1930s. As we're coming round to the starboard side of the aircraft, or the right-hand side, you can see it's extensively glazed, and these bubbles here on the side of the cockpit will enable the pilot or the observer to actually look backwards to assist in looking for any fighters and such.
The team at Duxford have also acquired the last remaining nose section from a Mark I fuselage, which served as a night fighter in the Battle of Britain. It was subsequently turned into an electric car. However, after painstaking restoration, the team intends to fit it to the Mark IV fuselage and fly it at air displays.
Down here we will have the bomb bay, and then into here, which is the main escape hatch for the rear gunner radio operator, is here. Right, this is the rear fuselage, and if we look back, we can see the wireless operator gunner air station there. His radio would be behind the turret. This is a Canadian-built version, so it has an extra seat because the Canadians carried an extra radio operator who sat on this seat, and his radio would have been in the position I'm in here. Behind the gun turret would have been the radio, very difficult to operate, I'm led to understand. Even to change frequencies, they would have had to traverse the turret, take various valves or components out of the radio, turn the turret and put them into the aircraft. So it's a very difficult job for him.
Well, the Blenheim pioneered many roles. One that immediately springs to mind is its role as a night fighter. It was the first aircraft in the world to carry radar, the first to carry out successful interceptions both by day and by night using air-to-air radar.
Well, it was only towards the very end of the Battle of Britain time that they introduced this AI, as I called it, aircraft interception. And it was like a small square television set. And the principle of it was it's similar to you've got today with your air traffic control. And I had to give them different instructions to finally get this blip into the centre of the screen. And by the time it's in the centre of the screen, it would be directly in front of the pilot. So if conditions were favourable, he could then see the enemy aircraft.
The Spitfires and Hurricanes defended these shores against the Luftwaffe, but the RAF bombers carried out continuous attacks on enemy airfields, on their ports where they were gathering the invasion shipping, and only the Blenheims could do this by night and by day, and they literally flew round the clock. And during the Battle of Britain, Bomber Command and Coastal Command lost considerably more aircrew than did Fighter Command.
We took off, at night. And there was a little red light that we just aimed for, and when it disappeared, pulled the stick back and off we went, see. And we survived. We managed to survive. It was very adventurous, but we survived.
At the start of the war, Ian Blair was an air gunner and radio operator. His first offensive operation was a raid on an enemy airfield near to Brook.
I didn't expect to be shot down, but having got over the target area and encountered the opposition, what went through my mind anyway was the training I had, you know. And when I opened fire on this aircraft, it must have been at least 300 yards away, if not more. It broke off its attack, and I thought to myself, this air fighting is very easy. He said, he thought, but in actual fact, the next 20 minutes it changed my outlook, because we were pursued relentlessly at low level, and I fired about 1,200 rounds in total.
We're sitting in the pilot station here, and as you can see, it's a single pilot seat. The observer would sit by the side of him, or until such time as he moved forward through the tunnel there to his navigating position. He would have his own instruments down there, his airspeed indicator and his remote compasses and instruments such as that to tell him what the aircraft was doing.
Ian Blair, by now himself a navigator, was flying one mission when they were attacked by an enemy fighter and his pilot killed.
You only think of self-preservation, and so we managed to get this aircraft out of this dive, and my air gunner, who crawled through from the back to the front, and between us we got the pilot out of the seat, and I got into the seat and pointed the aircraft due north, which took us right out into the middle of the Mediterranean somewhere. Being a navigator, I just set course for base, as near as I could guess. The blood wagon and all the staff cars were all lined up on the runway, fire tenders, and everybody all waiting to see us wrap ourselves around there. But it didn't happen, unfortunately. We had to disappoint them. And that was the end of my Blenheim career. I went on to become a pilot subsequently after that.
Ian was awarded the DFM for his actions and went on to pilot Spitfires, finally retiring from the RAF in 1973.
Well, we must remember to start with that all RAF wartime aircrew volunteered for the task, despite the immense dangers and the likelihood of death. And Bomber Command alone suffered 57,000 casualties during the war.
One of the roles the Blenheims undertook were low-level attacks on German shipping.
You trained for that kind of thing, and you knew that the Blenheim could handle very well. But once it was attacked, you were at a distinct disadvantage. You tried to get in as fast as you can, pull up as you'd release the bombs, which had an 11-second delay on them, and you relied on them bouncing along the surface and hitting the ship, and then you went over the top of his masts and down on the other side before your bombs went off. It was a matter of getting in at a fairly acute angle, but low, and also firing, because you had a single gun to fire forwards, just to keep their heads down if you could.
On one mission against a convoy near the Dutch coast, Tommy Thompson's flight was intercepted by a number of ME-110s. He was flying one of 5 Blenheims in a low-level formation when they were attacked.
And the back two started to fall astern as we started to do these S maneuvers. And they shot one of them down right away. The other one caught up with the formation, and on one of our straight runs, the single one of the 5 Messerschmitts made a run straight in from the stern and hit this other aircraft. And just out of the corner of my eye, I saw him rearing up and coming towards me with the whole of the upper surface of his starboard wing in absolute tatters. And I pulled a stick back and leapt up over the top of him and back into formation as he broke away and went towards the land. But he did either crash or he was shot down anyhow into the sea. He never made it. And we got away with it, but one of the intriguing things was that the spare 110 came straight in from astern and fired, and he pulled up just in front of the formation, and we could see look up into the cockpit, and you could see that the gunner in the thing was slumped down there, because the pilot must have thought he was alive. If he had been alive, he could have shot us all. Ping, ping, just like that.
It was a great aircraft, but it wasn't really a war machine. But we did lose a lot of people.
Apart from the fact that you knew that if you met fighter opposition, you were in for trouble, she did look after you very well. I would say that looking at it now, it brings all these memories back of different occasions, and amazing that we actually got away with them.
I mean, one was just doing what one had to do. You were very optimistic. You were going to your target, and immediately you'd dealt with your target, you'd set course for home. You weren't sort of worrying or anything like that, because you you couldn't tell what was going to happen. You would just do your best. You just took it for granted. Absolutely. But it was very sad when you lost your pals, of course. Very sad.
After more than 1,000 years of omnipotence, how the Roman Empire declined and fell, the complex reasons for its demise at 10. Next on Discovery History, more classic British aircraft take flight, the Gannet and the Shackleton.